Welcome to this explainer where we're going to explore a truly fascinating biological concept, which is how our bodies function remarkably like hybrid engines. Think about it. Just like a highly advanced hybrid car seamlessly shifts between gas and electric power depending on the road conditions, well, our physiology dynamically switches between different fuel sources to keep us running efficiently.
To kick things off, I want you to ask yourself a seemingly simple question. How efficiently does your body switch between burning fat and burning carbohydrates? Now, I know it kind of sounds like a pop quiz from a fitness magazine, but the answer is deeply rooted in our cellular biology, and it's absolutely critical to your overall health, your longevity, and disease prevention. Okay, let's dive right into this core concept. It's called metabolic flexibility. Now, this idea originally came from research on how organisms adapt to environmental shifts, but it's evolved into this vital framework for understanding human fuel selection. At its core, metabolic flexibility is literally what allows you to transition smoothly from a fasted state to a fed state, or say, from resting on the couch to suddenly sprinting up a hill. It is the absolute key to understanding insulin resistance and getting to the bottom of modern epidemics like obesity and type 2 diabetes. So we're going to break this explainer down into 5 key parts today. First, the human hybrid engine. Second, muscle and adipose tissue. Third, when the engine stalls. Fourth, the power of exercise. And finally, timing your body clock. Starting right off with part 1, the human hybrid engine. Let's examine how a healthy engine effortlessly toggles between those fuel tanks depending on exactly what our body is doing, whether it's day or night. What we see here brilliantly illustrates that internal hybrid engine in action. During sleep and periods of fasting, our bodies rely heavily on fatty acid oxidation, so burning fat for fuel, and lipolysis, which is the release of stored fat. But the moment we wake up and eat a meal, the whole system completely shifts gears. We immediately switch to burning the glucose we just consumed, storing the excess as glycogen, and storing dietary fat. It's honestly a highly coordinated, beautiful system. The crucial takeaway here is that a healthy transition from fasting to feeding requires a rapid, super efficient shift. We have to move from catabolic breakdown, liberating that stored energy, straight to anabolic storage. And the master conductor orchestrating this entire symphony, that's insulin. When insulin gets released in response to a meal, it essentially tells the body, hey, stop breaking down fat and start clearing this glucose out of the bloodstream. Moving to part 2, muscle and adipose tissue. Let's introduce the 2 primary mechanisms that actually make this hybrid engine work so well. That's our skeletal muscle and our white adipose tissue. You can really think of skeletal muscle as the main engine block of the body. When insulin gives the green light after a meal, skeletal muscle acts as this massive sink. It accounts for a staggering 60 to 80% of the increase in glucose metabolism. It requires huge amounts of glucose to enter the cells to fuel our movement and replenish those glycogen stores, which effectively and safely clears all that glucose out of your blood. Meanwhile, we have white adipose tissue, or just body fat. Historically, we've kind of viewed fat as just this inert storage unit, right? But white adipose tissue actually orchestrates fuel flux through a highly adaptable process called triacylglycerol cycling, which is really just a fancy way of saying it acts like a smart fuel injector. It's constantly packing and unpacking fat molecules to meet the exact demands of your muscle. So no, it's definitely not just a trunk in the back of the car for excess baggage. But part 3, when the engine stalls. What actually happens when this delicate, highly communicative system loses its adaptability? Well, this is exactly where we start to see the breakdown that leads to the modern cardiometabolic epidemics of obesity and type 2 diabetes. We can actually observe this engine stalling in real time. When subjects are given an acute lipid overload, think of it like chugging a heavy cream milkshake. Trained subjects adapt perfectly. They instantly decrease glucose oxidation, they increase fat oxidation, and they preserve their muscle glycogen. But the untrained individuals, they experience a total engine stall. They become metabolically inflexible. They basically fail to decrease glucose oxidation or properly increase fat oxidation when faced with that exact same lipid overload. They're just stuck in the wrong gear. And this metabolic gridlock builds into an undeniable problem. If we track the storage and release of fats over 24 hours, covering 3 meals, we see that lean men efficiently store dietary fat after each meal. But abdominally obese men progressively store less and less dietary fat in their adipose tissue after each subsequent meal. And because the adipose tissue isn't storing it, all those excess circulating lipids have to go somewhere. This leaves them to wreak absolute havoc and get deposited ectopically in other tissues, like the liver and the muscle. We see this compounding over time. Individuals with type 2 diabetes have significantly blunted insulin responsiveness in their adipose tissue compared to healthy or active people. So this constant metabolic gridlock means the tissue can no longer suppress the release of fatty acids when it's supposed to. This creates a really vicious cycle that heavily drives the onset and the progression of type 2 diabetes. Which brings us to part 4, the power of exercise. Fortunately, our biology isn't fixed in stone. The science reveals a highly effective, built-in way to tune up this engine and restore its flexibility. And that is through the profound physiological demands of physical exercise. When you exercise, you aren't just burning calories. You are basically taking your car into the shop and literally reconstructing the cellular machinery to enhance overall energy production. The research shows that physical activity drives these incredible changes across the entire Omics spectrum. It alters the epigenome, changing DNA methylation related to how we store fat. It alters the transcriptome, turning up gene expression for oxidative phosphorylation so we can produce energy better. And it alters the proteome, totally restructuring kinase networks and protein synthesis. It's a full system overhaul. And interestingly, how you exercise acts as different types of tuning for this engine. As you increase your physical activity, higher intensities will rapidly burn through glucose. And, brilliantly, this actually happens completely independent of insulin. On the other hand, longer durations of exercise force the engine to adapt by efficiently tapping into those stored fatty acids to sustain your energy over time. Both methods are absolutely critical for maintaining a fully flexible system. This striking 24-hour metabolic chamber data tracks something called the respiratory quotient, or RQ. Basically, that's just a measurement of whether the body is burning mostly carbs or mostly fat. The jagged line of a healthy body shows it smoothly toggling between these fuels, responding instantly to breakfast, lunch, exercise, and sleep. But contrast that with the diabetic condition. The line remains elevated and flat. It demonstrates this rigid, inflexible response where the body struggles to switch fuel forces, totally regardless of what is happening in the environment. Finally, part 5, timing your body clock. We've talked a lot about eating and moving, but repairing our metabolic flexibility is equally about when we rest, and that leads us to the vital role of circadian rhythms. A recent scientific statement by the American Heart Association confirms this beautifully. They define circadian health as the alignment of our internal system to the external light-dark cycle. Human physiology is intricately regulated by these roughly 24-hour rhythms, which are perfectly adapted for daytime activity and nighttime rest. The research makes it crystal clear. Disrupting this cycle, say through late-night eating or really erratic sleeping, severely damages our cardiometabolic health and flat-out destroys metabolic flexibility. In fact, the science shows that keeping a consistent sleep schedule is paramount. Going to bed and waking up at the exact same time, in alignment with the natural light-dark cycle, is just as important for repairing your metabolic engine as the total amount of sleep you get. You can't just sleep for 8 hours at random times of the day or sleep in wildly on the weekends and expect the engine to run smoothly. It just doesn't work that way. So knowing that your body is a brilliant hybrid engine, one that demands the molecular overhaul of physical exercise and the precise circadian alignment of a regular sleep schedule to remain metabolically flexible, the only question left is, when are you going to schedule your next tune-up? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.